everyone and welcome back to today's video. Today is going to be a recent reads video. This is recent reads number 5. I wanted to say my recent reads video was not as up to date as I would like them to be, so if you're ever just curious about the books that I am sort of currently reading at the moment or have read in the past week or so, the best place to find out about that would be my Goodreads, and that is linked in the description box down below. However, today I'm going to speak to you about 4 books that I have read recently. These books have probably been read during the month of like February, March, I want to say. I'm not too sure. Yeah, so I hope to get through like 4 books today. I might talk about 3, it just depends on how long I talk about each book for. The first book I'm going to speak about is Happy Ever After, and this is by C.C. McDonald or something like that. I mean, I'll put the picture here and I will put the name of the book and the author in the description box down below as well. I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars. I would recommend that you also look at my written review for this book on Goodreads, because I started off the review saying if ever there was like the definition of doing too much, it is this book. This book is about our main character Naomi. Naomi has moved to, I don't know, somewhere near Portsmouth. It's not near Portsmouth, it's near the sea. She originally, I think, is from London, or at least she spent the majority of her working life in London, and her husband, due to some circumstances, have ended up in a house that they didn't actually want to end up in. They have always wanted to move away from London, but that's not the place that they wanted to, and you find out what those circumstances were. She has a daughter, I think her daughter's name is Prudence, and she is currently trying for baby number 2, and you know, her and her husband are very much in a strict schedule where they have to have sex whenever, like, it's her, I can't even remember what the term of the name is now, but I want to say her evolution period. It's definitely not that, like the time that she's most fertile, but anyway, so their relationship just feels very stilted, because imagine only having to have sex like during that time. I know a lot of people actually go through that, but when you read about it like that, it just sounds so stilted, but obviously you can't really judge that situation until you're in it. But anyway, let's move on from that, because that's not what this book is about. So yeah, they're very much like that, and you can sense that they're both very unhappy people. Anyway, our main character Naomi doesn't really have a lot of friends in this new place. She does work, and she also takes her daughter to nursery, and through nursery she meets this man named Sean. All of this bit is on the back of the book, by the way, like her not having many friends and meeting this guy through nursery. She has an encounter with him, and after that he completely disappears. Like, she has no idea where he has gone. She's not able to get in contact with him, and she needs to get in contact with him. And from there, this is where the book spirals on. I can't really discuss much about the book without ruining it, so I'm not going to do that, even though I desperately want to. But this book did so much for no reason. There were so many things going on that I was just like, no. So there is basically a story to do with Naomi and this guy, and then who this guy really is, and just the many ways that this guy has infiltrated like her life. Basically, the story is wild, and it's not even really to do with Naomi, even though it very much is to do with Naomi. I will say what the story does manage to do, I think, was really clever, was really show us Naomi's character, and really show us the depth, the length, that Naomi is willing to go to have her perfect family. Like, that is a woman who knows what she wants. Whilst I read it and thought, this bitch is crazy, I was like, you know what? This woman knows what she wants. I got to the end of it and I was like, bravo, like, you carried your family through the bullshit that your husband did before, and you carried them through now. I like, hats off to her, not hands off. Other than that, yeah, this book was too much. Way too much, but I also kind of think maybe this is the kind of thing that happens regularly in thrillers, and because I don't read a lot of thrillers, I read them and I'm just like, why are you doing this? This is too much, this is not believable, stop it. It just kept going further and further away from me, and I was just like, please stop this. Every single chapter as it went on in this book, I was like, is this a joke to you? Like, oh, is this a joke to you? But you know, at the end of it, I gave it 3 stars because I did enjoy reading it. I did get to a point where I was just like, this is bloody ridiculous. But I was turning the pages and I wanted to continue reading it. And for that reason, I gave it 3 stars because I was like, well, you did what you wanted to do. You were a page turner. It's just whether or not I thought that those bits were realistic, and it wasn't. I will say I did find the back of the book misleading. It did say that someone knew her secret, Naomi's secret, and was like sort of about to get her. And as you read the book, that's not true. Like, no one else knows the secret. It's just her and Sean, and the person out to get her is Sean. I don't know if the book was trying to create suspense by saying it was someone else, but it never tries to direct you to the fact that it is someone else. No one is ever actually blackmailing her in the book. She's always aware that it's going to be her against Sean, because it's not like Sean disappears and someone starts hunting her down. She starts looking for Sean, so I was just really confused about that. But anyway, I would definitely encourage you to read my review. I think it's actually going to be more useful than the review I've given here, because I was a lot closer to the book. But yeah, that book it just makes me laugh. Like I remember reading that book and the other book that I spoke about in my recent reads, You Can't Catch Me, and I was like, these thrillers are hella wild. Like, if this is how thrillers go, fair play to them, but boy, wild. Sorry, I told some lies. I said I gave this 3 stars. I gave it 2. So all that I said about the reason for why I gave it a 3 was clearly a lie. I clearly didn't give it a 1 because of the other reasons. But yeah. But as I was saying it, when I was saying I gave it a 3, so that makes sense, but I was thinking, why did you give it a 3? So yes, I'm glad I know me deep down. I just clearly can't see when I'm looking at my Goodreads. The next book I'm going to speak about is An Unquiet Mind, a memoir of moods and madness by K. Redfield Jameson. I ended up giving this book 5 out of 5 stars. I thought it was just wonderfully written. It was a really wonderful insight into manic depression, which is now bipolar disorder. And yeah, well, without knowing anything about the disorder, I couldn't really be like, this is wrong, this is wrong. And obviously everyone's account of their own mental illness and their own struggles is completely theirs, and you can't really, say, that's wrong. But I did really enjoy reading this book. It was obviously a really tough subject to read about in terms of the ups and downs in her life, but it was really good. This book is basically a memoir. K. Redfield Jameson is also a doctor, so I'm not sure if initially her studies was in mental illness, but I think because of her own personal illness, she decided to go into the field of, I don't know, bipolar depression, manic depression. I think it obviously gets a bit more specific as you go along, but she already was at the level for a doctor. I'm not really sure how it works in the US. I'm not even sure how it works that well in the UK. So yeah, that's the reason why this book is probably a bit more, I guess, interesting to see, because it's from the perspective of someone who suffers with the illness, but also someone who has to treat the illness. And you get a lot of that duology in here, where she's obviously suffering with her illness and she's talking about herself, and then she's talking about how she helped other people and how she can see some of the things that she did when she was manic, that other people are doing, and how she knows at the end of it it's a case of them being able to, like, obviously respond to the therapy and respond to the medication that they're getting, but also be able to help themselves. This book feels quite dated, and that's okay because of the time when it was written. Like, I think she's writing about, like, I don't know, 1980s, the early 90s and things like that, because that's obviously when she was, like, becoming a doctor and when she was suffering from these things. So, like, I think lithium, which is one of the main drugs that's used to treat bipolar, had just been introduced, and I think she was, one of the first people to try it and things like that. So it's a really interesting insight into, the beginnings of the studies for manic depression. I can't really say any more about this book other than, the fact it is a memoir. She does talk about, like, her childhood growing up, talks about her parents, and perhaps where some of the things might have come into play, so if it's genetic in any way, shape or form. And then, she just talks about her relationships, her life in general, some of the some of the downsides, obviously the downsides, of bipolar. I think she is now what they would call bipolar 1, so her mania, and also her depression, but like her mania when she was spending loads of money and just not having any any sort of thought of, like, don't do this, and how many times that she had to be sort of, like, bailed out by her brother. She seemed to have, like, a sort of a good family, but there were some people in her family that were just a bit like, we're not dealing with this, whereas, like, she had her brother who was very helpful. And there are some other things that happened to her, just, like, general sad life stuff, like people passing away in her life and things like that. So it was a really well-rounded memoir, I thought. And I thought, obviously, the interesting perspective of this was the fact that she studied it. So it was very interesting to see her talking to other doctors, and she talks about when she reveals, that she personally suffers from it, how other doctors viewed her. And it just makes you so sad to think that, and you already know this, how people think about mental illness, but to think that people who are treating other patients with this would sort of reject or say negative things to a colleague that has it. But I guess, I'm going to say they hold colleagues to a higher standard, but obviously we know mental illness doesn't discriminate. So yeah, you can see that a lot of them struggled with the fact that she suffered with it, but then there were other people who were just like, yeah, we can sort of tell, like, not in that sort of way, oh, you can tell we're, a bit crazy. They're like, yeah, we know, like, we're doctors, we know, and they just go about their day and it's absolutely nothing to them. So there were really two sides of the coin in that, and I just felt like this was a really well-rounded memoir in that sense. I will say my only sort of cons with this was that I felt like the narrative was a bit uncoordinated. Like, she talks about her life chronologically at some points, but then jumps back, and it's a bit annoying. At some points you'll be following a chronological order, but then she'll randomly, like, say, yeah, I'm married, and it's just like, at what point during the other, like, 15 pages or so pages before did you get married? Like, it seems really random that she would mention very much later in her life that she was married, but not mention getting married or meeting that person. So then, I think in the beginning it is sort of chronological, but as it continues, it's not chronological. It goes back and forth because she's talking about past relationships, you know, then she's not in her marriage anymore. You're just kind of like, when did all of this happen? So like, I feel like there's some chronological order in the sense of her growing up and her illness, but there's no chronological order for the things that are happening in her personal life. So you get thrown back to other things in her personal life that you're just like, so at what point in the sort of growing up scale did this happen? Other than that, I couldn't actually fault this book. I always feel saying other than that I couldn't actually fault this book as if the reason to like review a book is to find 10,000 faults in it. But yeah, no, I just really enjoyed this book, so I ended up giving it 5 out of 5. My washing machine has now started going off, and I can't pause this to film it because it will probably go on for like another half an hour. But the next book that I'm going to talk about is Kenke for Ewes. This is actually a short story collection, and I spoke about this in my Books of DNF video, and I spoke about the fact that I've been reading this book for a long ass time. Is that window broken? The people opposite us have taken the quarantine time to redo their windows, and I think they're doing it themselves, and absolutely amazing. They've been doing like the outside of the windows and I don't know, things to do with windows, but I think they might be changing the glass on it because one of it's just broken. I can see it now, that was one of mine. But anyway, that's what this video is about. Kenke for Ewes is a short story collection. It's curated, I assume, by a Ghanaian author, a Ghanaian publishing house, and they're all stories from Ghanaian authors, and it's just really lovely. Like I said, I spoke about it in my Books the DNF video. I spoke about the fact that I had been reading it or listening to it since last year, and I just had no inkling to go back to it, so I just really, like, it wasn't that I didn't like it, so I don't think I was ever going to DNF it, but I did at one point consider being like, if you're just not passionate about it, why are you reading it or listening to it? But I ended up going back to listen to it, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I have to say, like, there are some pockets of stories that I do remember. They're very much short stories. Like, I don't know how many people have contributed to this collection, but they're very much short stories, and I would like to get hold of a physical copy because I think I would benefit from reading it that way. Like, for example, there's a story of a man who has lost his memory, and he sort of wakes up and he gets sort of repeats that day. I think I said this in the Books I DNF one, but it reminds me of 51st Dates, but very much like not, but it's that sort of same exact concept. And the story is sort of told, I guess in the third person, and I feel like it then goes to the first person later, so I'm not really too sure. Maybe that was just my wrong understanding of it. There's a story of a woman who, it's a beautiful story, and again, I think I mentioned this as well, but it must be like 101 birthday or something like that. She is very old, and as she walks into the sort of room, like, she's surrounded by like her children, but then her grandchildren, and in like sort of the grandchildren, she's seeing like her siblings who have obviously passed away. She was like, oh, that is basically my brother, but it's actually so-and-so's grandchild. And she asked someone, like, who is that? Like, what child is that? What child is that? Whose child is that? And things like that. And I just thought that was really nice. There are so many wonderful short stories in there, and what I loved about this was the little bits of Twi in there. So Twi is one of the languages in Ghana, and that's what I've grown up like listening to. I would love to say speaking, but I don't know how to speak it other than little pockets here and there. I was actually supposed to be in Ghana, so I'm a little bit heartbroken. Like, when you will be seeing this, I probably would have been in Ghana if it hadn't been for the coronavirus. What I liked about this collection was I felt like every single story felt like a bit of a mystery. You were kind of like, this is the only analogy I can think of, but it's like you're zoomed in on something, and as the story expands, like, you're zooming out and you're zooming out, and then you're getting the full picture. It felt like a lot of the stories were like that. You started off somewhere, you just felt a bit confused and lost as to what was going on, and then as it expanded, you really understood, and you're like, this is good. I like how you started this because it had that element of mystery. Also, a little bit reminds me of what Breaking Bad used to be like when it first started. When Breaking Bad first, released its first season, I remember so vividly this one episode where it starts off and like a car is springing. It's like bouncing? Yeah, it's bouncing. And either the focus is on the spring or it's on the car bouncing. And as it zooms out, you get more of the picture. And then, obviously, if you guys have ever watched Breaking Bad, I quite like Breaking Bad for the connectivity it does. So it starts off with that car scene, and as you're zooming out, you see how that's connected to another scene. You basically see how you got to this final image, and that's what it kind of does. It takes you backwards. Yeah, it sort of rewinds. It takes you backwards until you're back to that final scene, and it usually then comes back to that final sort of opening image. I feel like they locked that off as they started to get really popular, but this is kind of what that story reminded me of. You kind of started at the beginning, this really small part, and as you zoomed out, you got the full picture. I've already said that, so you know what I mean. But yeah, I think I ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars. The final book I'm going to speak to you about today is called Wintering, and this is by Catherine May. It actually has a longer title, so I'm just going to read it. And it says, Wintering, How I Learned to Flourish When Life Became Frozen. And I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. So this was a NetGalley arc, so I requested it. I am trying to request less things from NetGalley, and I have been staying true to that, but I think this might have been, no, this is after I said I wanted to request less things from NetGalley. But it jumped out to me and I was just like, I can't not read that. I was going to yap on about like what this book is about, but let me just read some of the back. Wintering, the dormant periods in our lives, the dark moments we endure. Catherine May recounts her own year-long journey through winter and how she found strength and inspiration when life felt frozen. Part memoir, part exploration of the human condition, Wintering explores the healing nature of the great outdoors to help us overcome and embrace our own wintering experiences, and how, much like nature, we can learn to appreciate these low periods and what they have to teach us before the ushering in of a new season. So yeah, the book is exactly that, and one of the reasons I requested that is because as we were coming sort of out of winter in Scotland and coming into spring, something like that would be really nice. And it is a really nice book. Catherine takes us on that sort of journey through winter. She starts from like September, November, December, so she takes us through in that sense, but she's also able to tie in sort of winter sort of holidays, like winter solace I want to say, and like Halloween, but also the other version of Halloween, like the actual Halloween, and then some sort of like Christian aspects. I think she goes to like a Swedish church or something like that, so she very much pulls in religious holidays as well that are centered around winter and that sort of dark evening time. And usually what she does in this, she'll have like November, and then it's sort of a personal story of something that happened to her during that November. So if she stayed at home and did something, and then say there was like, I don't know, Halloween, I know Halloween is in October, but then say there was Halloween, then she'd also talk about that subject. One of my personal favourites was one of her essays called Epiphany. It's about her son not being happy in school and how she pulls him out of school. But she talks about the fact that they've taken that time of winter and that darkness to recover, and I liked that. Obviously that was really nice because it was something that, you know, naturally seamlessly happened in her life. It didn't happen for the purpose of the book, but you can see how winter and, you know, staying inside might be a chance of recuperation for them, and how, I don't know, just it being winter and it being dark and cold, that you can take that time to sort of be a bit slower. Another essay of hers that I thought was really nice was called Darkness. I wrote here, her ability to relate things back to the winter is seamless because a lot of her experiences naturally occur in it. So yeah, I just said that previously. A lot of her experiences, lucky for her, naturally occur in the winter, but they also seem to fit that sort of theme, that darkness of winter. Also I said, nevertheless, it's the beauty in her writing and linking it together that makes this book so wonderful. However, sometimes it does feel like a history lesson. I wrote this down here. A lot of the things that she learns sometimes feels like this huge brain dump on you, the reader. Some of it isn't so seamless, this is what I'm trying to say. There's a bit where she talks about wolves, and I can't remember what essay it falls into. And I was just like, nah, you don't need to bring the wolves into this. And it's fine if it was just a sort of random nod to wolves. But then she goes on to talk about how she spoke to this like history professor, and then there's like 2 huge paragraphs about wolves. It probably is longer than that. And I was just like, this just feels like you're trying to make a bit of a history lesson, and this one feels like a bit of a stretch. And it wasn't just about like the wolves one, because sometimes I thought maybe it's just you don't like the subject, but even with like when she was tying in, I want to say it's like Sabbath, anyway, when she's tying in the like Halloween one, it just felt a bit too much. Like it was, I got the reference, but then she went on and on to give us more information about how it started and things like that, and then it just more began to feel like a history lesson. And it was just like, I don't care that deeply about it. And actually going back to the wolfish thing I put here, some stories aren't so seamless. For example, when she links humans' wolfish behaviour to her friend who paid off loads of debt. It was a stretch link and the story wasn't warranted or linked. I can't actually now remember the ins and outs of that, but I think she's talking about one of her friends. I think she might suffer from bipolar or something like that, but she's trying to tie in the link between sort of wolfish behaviour and obviously wolves. You think of them being in like snowy places and roaming around in packs and things like that, or being a lone wolf. But then she talks about wolfish behaviour and linking that to the amount of spend that her friend is doing, and I was just like, a reach. And I also don't think that wolfish part was linked to the other part where she was talking about wolves. It was after that essay. So yeah, whilst a lot of those things did fit in really seamlessly, some bits didn't, and a lot of the parts that did fit in seamlessly that naturally occurred in her life, sometimes when she tried to obviously research them and, you know, give us more depth about it, it just felt like a history lesson. It felt like a brain dump, and it was just like, that's not really necessary. But that is the reason why I ended up giving the book 3 out of 5, because whilst I really enjoyed it, I thought a lot of her themes were really linked. I think sometimes when you're writing something like this and things don't come together naturally, you don't need to force it. Like I would rather those bits were sort of absent than me having to read through a buffer. And I always think buffers in like things like essay collections, obviously this is a bit, you know, it's part memoir, so it's a bit personal and part sort of essay. Buffers and these things I don't know, I kind of think it's a bit of an insult to the reader. Like, don't insult us by giving us less than what sort of we know you're capable of. But that is it for this video. So yes, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I particularly liked the books that I've spoken about. I think I've given you guys a good insight into the sort of things that I like and what actually makes a book like good for me. Let me know if you're interested in any of these books that I mentioned. I'm more than happy to talk about them in the comments below. Please do not forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!